gratitude.
We see for ourselves, because what I've realized for myself, that sometimes it's even hard for folks to connect with the child in them, because you didn't have the best experiences as a child, right? Some of my childhood was fabulous, and some of my childhood was not. And so when people used to say, "Well, think of your little self," I'd have to do some work to figure out, well, which little self, right?
Right.
So when I'm saying childlike, I mean the child that you wanted to be, and the child that has the curiosity, and the child that is excited, the child where everything is good and everything is bright and everything is different. I think I need that child part in my life to deal with the heavy things happening. Um, and I think that that child part also keeps us honest, right? For me, my child self does not have a filter. Um, so that child self can call it like it is. It could be incredibly amazing, or that child self can also say, "Ew," or that's awful. I'm still curious and still in love with the world, but also no, right? And
Mhm.
so that's why I think having the totality of the child self is important, to have that with us all the time.
Um, Thinking about like what we're living through right now, and in all of the ways and all of the things and the layers and the the sharp edges of what we're going through, and thinking about like grief and all of the grief that we're experiencing, like big and little. um I thought it was really important to like recognize that as a country, like we don't mourn together unless like the government says, okay, on this day you're going to read these 3,800 names and that's what we're going to grieve. Like what are, and you could just tell me to like kick rocks with this question if you want. But like
Oh,
what are some ways that like even in small pockets of community, like that that we can elevate the like grieving, like
hmm. I, you know, I want to be wrong, but I feel like there's still a number of us that, one, you're right, we don't get to grieve. We don't get the green light to grieve,
yeah,
right? We get the green light to be angry, yes.
yeah,
People are always like, yes, be angry. You, in fact, you almost get cheered or applauded if you're angry. Or it's an expectation, especially as a Black woman or a person of color. People just expect that, like, that's just part of your CV and your resume. It's the fabric of your life. Of course, you're going to be angry, right? But I think some of us are afraid to grieve.
mhm,
Therefore, we become numb. Numb is the new grief. Numbing and being apathetic is like the placeholder for grief. And we know as practitioners and workers that those are different.
yeah,
So I think it sounds strange, but I think we need to dig into acknowledging that, listen, we have to grieve. And it's not just being numb, or it's not just being like, well, I don't know, I don't care, I can't change anything. Like, we have to go there. So I think acknowledging the hurt,
mhm,
acknowledging the the mourning, acknowledging the stillness is necessary. Especially in a group of young folks that are around lately with the computer and now social distance schooling. I feel like everything is telling us, stay in a box, do not grieve, do not mourn, do not show emotions. Um, and so I think it's important to tap into that, even if you just say, hey, sad, instead of a bunch of people rushing saying, don't be sad, don't be sad. It's almost like, don't feel it, don't feel it. Then those people can say, you know what, me too.
yeah,
I'm hella sad.
yeah,
We're really sad, and we're just gonna acknowledge the sadness right now. And then we're gonna talk about what it looks like to move through sadness, not away from sadness. I think that grieving means moving through. You're not trying to escape some storm.
Mhm.
You're trudging through the storm.
Yeah, yeah. Like being able to be in it and feel it and learn it and
Yeah.
and listen to what it's teaching you, what it's telling you. Um,
Yeah. It probably sounds silly, maybe not a good comparison or thought, but like I remember one of my first instances as a younger person understanding what it might be like to work with grief and move through grief, and that is from a Billie Holiday song. When she's saying "Good morning, heartache," it's the first time I ever heard someone um, talk about heartache and grief, personifying it as a person.
mhm.
And in the song, she's not running from it. She's just like, sit down, have some coffee with me. Good morning, heartache. We're moving through this. We're gonna talk about this.
Yeah, setting it a place at the table.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I get caught up in our wheel of productivity and how that impacts the ways that we engage with grief and like the space that we make for it. Um, how doing all of the things that you do because because
Yeah.
you do so much, like you do so much and like with a heart wide open. um this is another thing you can tell me to kick rocks on, but how do you weave it into, how do you weave space,
For the
uh,
grief.
yeah, while you're doing and giving and being all that you are to community.
I have to say I give gratitude for being a creative person. I can weave the grief in my creative practices. I can write about it. Um, I can give hard talks about it,
Yeah.
right? Even if I'm not talking about grief, I can still talk about the hard things with other people. Engaging other people about the hard stuff
Yeah.
usually leads to grief in some way. So for me, I just make it a part of my creative modalities.
Mhm.
It is just setting a placeholder for it and not looking at it as if it's a bad thing, right? You got poems about rainbows and butterflies. You got poems about ancestors. You got poems about grief, right? It's just
Yeah.
like I look for ways to incorporate the grief, the mourning, the hurt, and the pain instead of compartmentalizing it and making it seem like it's a separate thing. It is part of me,
Yeah.
it's part of who I am, and it helps make me who I am. And so I weave it into that. I also have to, like I said, take more space to play. Going back to that child me, because it's the grief and the mourning and the sadness is part of my life. For example, yesterday I went on a walk, and there was a pile of leaves that someone else so diligently raked up. And as a child, I used to love waiting for my mom to rake the leaves so I can jump in them. And, subsequently with my own children, I would spend hours raking leaves just so they could jump in a pile. And I'm walking yesterday and I saw this ready made pile. you know, Adult me was just like, this is someone else's pile. They've done the work. Kid me took pictures, sent it to my wife, sent it to my kids. Like, doesn't this just look perfect to jump into? You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
Small things, small things. So I have to do both.
Yeah.
I have to do both, and I have to let it be a part of my work and a part of my life.
Yeah. With people who are like not necessarily willing to engage in admitting, acknowledging, and like just being with grief, um, do you use similar ways of talking about grief with them and like trying to weave it in the ways that that you two are together.
Yeah, I just don't call it out. Um, Sometimes I might go about it by asking a series of questions and letting them find their own grief. And at that point, when they do, they have a choice to stay with it or to run away from it.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm just the bridge. I'll get you there, I'll get you to a place, and then I'm going to sit there with you in class or in a workshop um, while you just sit there for a moment.
Yeah.
You don't have to say, "Oh, I've arrived at grief or sadness. I gotta go." You can just say, "All right, I'm here. I'm gonna sit here for a second before I move through or on or away."
Yeah.
So I do look at myself as a bridge to that space.
Thank you for saying that, because I think it's really important to like highlight the fact that there's the bridge, and it's not like a push.
Yeah,
And even in like a lot of situations, especially in death care and like medicalized situations, people feel so entitled to what's going on in a person that they'll take,
yeah,
right? And the harm that can be caused by that, especially if it is a white person taking again from a person of color who's like all uncomfortable in this situation, and there's that air of entitlement again.
yeah.
Mhm. So
I also think that sometimes making space for a person to grieve, even if they don't. You know, part of that bridge work is you are like, all right, I'm. They may not, with the reality that like, hey, when y'all get across the bridge, this person may not choose to be in it, but at least we can make space. We can clear the space. We can do everything that needs to be done in case when they get across the bridge, they actually do want to take a moment to
yeah.
be in the process.
Mhm.
I think that's part of the secret or the underground work.
Yeah.
It's like that invisible net. And then if we did all this work and you were like, I don't wanna do this, then that's your choice, and I'm gonna honor your choice, and I'm gonna be right back again and do the work if should you decide to revisit.
Yeah.
I think that allowing people to visit grief or be in their grief is not necessarily just a one time thing, right? We have to be patient. We have to be patient grief givers. You can't just be like, at 8:05, you will experience grief and you have about 20 minutes.
Right.
You know, at 8:25, I'm going to check in on you and you better be crying, right? It's,
Right.
I don't think it works like that.
You should be at stage 3.
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah. I think you're up. I think I know where you're at right now. How about we just move past the bawling and crying? We'll just move on to you processed it. You
Right.
processed it. And I just yeah, I don't think it works like that.
No, no. Listo has a question. What if something that brings you joy is something that others don't like? For example, a person who likes constant dialogue.
You like constant dialogue and they don't.
Mm-hmm.
Um I think there are ways to compromise. If you're working with a person, find out what do they like. And remember the kid in you is always ready to be make a like let's see how we can compromise. Um and I think also too letting people know in advance, it might feel vulnerable, but letting people know in advance who you are, what your love language is, what your modalities are.
Yeah.
I usually say immediately, you know, I'm a lover, I'm a hugger. I like to look lovingly into a person's eyes. You know, I like to pre-COVID. I'm a hugger. I like to touch. How do you feel about that? Here's what I'm willing to compromise, and here are things that just aren't going to change about me. Tell me about you.
Mm-hmm.
Where can we meet in the middle with this? Because I don't think it's fair. Is it listo for you to just decide like, okay, I'm just gonna not be my authentic self? I I I, I think there has to be you expressing who you are and you presenting the question of the compromise.
Mm-hmm.
instead of waiting
Yeah.
to compromise.
Yeah. Yeah. Where do we meet?
How can we meet? Not where, if, how. What are we going to do? I'm so excited. So excited about this compromise. Where can we meet in the middle?
I'm excited that we're recording this because I want to write that note down.
And you'll do it in outline form, won't you? Won't you? I know you will.
Um, and then I'm going to paint around it. What, like, if we're working with, Heidi asked, if we're working with young humans, um, how have you, if you have, like, how have you worked with young humans in grieving process, and how do we help them instill joy in that process?
I've worked with a lot of young people who were grieving and didn't have words to articulate that they were grieving. So their grief came by ways of them acting. I hate that cliche phrase, but like acting out or acting out and checking out.
Mhm.
Um, and I think depending on the age that a young person is too little to understand big terms like, honey, you're just grieving. I don't think I don't I don't think that they can wrap their head around that. So again, going back to those modalities, coloring,
Yeah.
talking, playing, I don't think we should call it out right away.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow reassuring them like, you know, I know it might be hard to believe, but at 11 or at 9, you have the possibility of being in this world a lot longer. What do you think it looks like 10 years from now? Even though it will be hard for them to think about it, always future thinking, I think, is really important for a young person because, when you're young, you think everything the world revolves around you anyway, even when things are good. Even when things are good, you think it's just all about you and that no one else is having your
Yeah.
experience and that no one understands you. And so I think opening that up. Um, and also, I sometimes use other young people's stories.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a bit of research, but I want to be able to communicate with young people on their terms. So I will look up other young people that might be going through similar things. I will look up what young person is listening to music wise. I will look up what young person likes art wise. I want to be able to have the language and the skill base to have a 9-year-old conversation or an 11-year-old conversation or a 17-year-old conversation because I'm 48 and it doesn't make any sense for me to expect that my 48-year-old self wants an 11-year-old to come up to where I am. So sometimes, as a way to get to the grief, I ask them questions or dig into their world in the pop culture and an art way because it's sort of a distraction. It's a way for us to talk about grief that is a little bit more fun than just like, I'm sad, I feel crappy. It's like, if you could tell me 5 songs that totally explain how you're feeling, what would they be? What's the soundtrack of your life right now, right? What's your mixtape, right? And if I've done my work, I could say, oh yeah, that song too.
Mm-hmm.
Totally feel that song. So that's I don't know how much time, but even within an hour, one can do that. You can like get into their world. That's usually what I do when I'm working with young people that obviously I can see that they are hurting, grieving, feeling a loss. I hope that's helpful.
I think it is, and I think it also, like, it puts this really beautiful thread on the fact that, like, grown ass humans are no different feelers and than younger humans. Like, the ways that we can engage aren't like drastically different because someone has lived an extra 40 years, right?
Yeah. And once you find that common core, I I really do believe that like builds love and trust too, right? People need to trust us when they're grieving. Someone wants to be able to feel like, well, if we're gonna cross the bridge and you said I could do this, then I guess how I can hand this to you.
wish I could hug you right now.
I wish so too. I'm such a hugger.
Oh,
It sucks.
thank you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you
Yeah,
so much. Thank you all for listening and for your questions too.
absolutely. Oh, we have one more question that just came through. Um, do you around perfectionism? This is from a different summer. Um, do you have further tips for channeling a child self, that to make it exciting and fun outside of the ones that you mentioned?
Yes, but just beware for feeling weird. Like I mentioned, a very adult thing. I'm gonna go for a walk, get my exercise in, right? Once I got a block away from home, I asked my child self, what what do you like? What's out here that you like? Oh, you like the trees? Oh, you want to hug a tree? Let's go hug a tree. That's why, but I didn't jump into that pile. But I think manifesting our kid self when we're out with adults,
Yeah.
and in almost everything we do. I'm cooking. I might say, little A, what would you do differently? Would you add extra sugar, some cinnamon, some nutmeg? Oh, you want to taste some nutmeg? Let's get some nutmeg. Let's put it in the palm of our. Oh, really good, right? So I know it seems small, but just tapping into that throughout the day in almost everything you do. For a while, it might seem like, this is silly. I still feel like my adult me. But there will be a day when the child in you says, yes,
Yes.
nutmeg.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's tackle a tree, right? Yeah, for no reason. We have a meeting at 10. It's 9:15. Let's get a purple crayon. We're just going to sit at the table and draw and doodle some stars, right? Sometimes you have to do the activity to get to the child. That's one thing I wanted to say before time ran out. Sometimes the little you may not show up, so big you needs to sit down with the crayon and doodle. And then little you will say, oh, yeah, I remember how to do this. I don't do stars, I do circles, right? So that's my other advice. Sometimes big you has to just show up for little you to say, little you can, you can come along. You can come with me on this walk. You can come with me to cook dinner. You can even come with me to this very adult conversation. You sit in the corner over there while I'm doing adult things. So I hope that's helpful.
Pockets of joy exist in like all of the spaces that we get to be in, and it just takes like, what is my pocket of joy in this moment? Like, where is it? Because it's here.
And pockets come in all sizes. Big pockets, little pockets. Like it's still a pocket.
It's it.
We shouldn't judge ourselves either on like there shouldn't be a joy meter. Like if joy is joy.
Joy is joy. Thank you.
When you do the outline, make sure you send it to me.
I will. I will. I'll take a picture of it. And I'm so excited to go skipping on my walk
Yeah,
tomorrow.
skip, please skip, please. Who cares who's looking at you? Skip.
I was like, if I'm going for a walk, what would little Elle say? She would be like, okay, let's dance and let's skip. So
Let's skip. Let's dance when we got our head. Everybody's in their headphones. What's gonna hurt? What's gonna be bad if you're out there dancing?
yeah,
What?
yeah, yeah. They won't know what hit them.
They won't. And then they'll do it too.
Yes. Oh, Anastasia, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Yes.
Goodbye, everyone.
Have a great day. And everybody else, we have a little bit of a break. So move your bodies. I'm going to open that other chat room, and you can join if you want. You totally don't have to. Just wanted to have some space for people. Thank you so much for attending this Q&A.